Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Lash Extension Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Tress, and today we are talking about pivoting. This is the pivot episode, and I think that this is going to be a really important conversation because I'm really passionate about it. Erin's really passionate about it. We have a lot to say on the subject that will hopefully encourage you and help you keep moving forward, whatever stage of life you're in right now and wherever you're going. So, the reason that we wanted to talk about this is because there are so many different transitions that we have in our lives and in our careers, and we want to talk about what's normal, and we want to give you guys insight into the pivots and the changes and the closing doors and the opening doors that we've had in our own careers to help you see that where you're at right now is where you're supposed to be, but it's okay if plans change along the way.
Yeah, pivoting is really hard sometimes. And
Mhm.
in our careers, sometimes it's necessary, even though sometimes it can come with a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of transition, a lot of uncomfortable feelings. But sometimes it's very necessary to continue pushing us forward, continue pushing our purpose forward, and continue, expanding and growing in your career.
Yeah, a lot of times it comes with a lot of heartache. It comes with a lot of self-doubt, and it can really the self-doubt that can like kind of revolve around big transitions in our life can keep us stuck. It can keep us small. It can keep us feeling like we haven't made any progress forward when in fact we've made extraordinary progress forward.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to step back and give a couple examples from my earlier life because I feel like I've lived four different lives as a human being so far. But I kind of wanted to give an example from where I thought my career was going to go to where it is now and how it helped shape me and change me as a person. So everybody always says that hindsight is 2020, right? Like we can see the past very clearly. But what I would encourage you to do is help the past, like, no, allow the past to help you see the future clearly.
Mm,
If you have always gotten through it, if
yeah.
you have always come to your next level, if you have always continued to put one foot in front of the other, which I know you have, right? You can use the experiences that you have in the past to look forward and go, right now I'm in the thick of it, or I'm thinking about making a big transition in my life or a pivot in my career. And I can see that the past shows me that I can always pivot and I can always get through it. And that's so important.
Yeah, I love that. So Tress is going to give an example of her past and some past experiences that she had that is relevant to this. And I'm actually going to talk about some future and current transitions that I'm going through and pivots that I'm making currently. So you guys are kind of getting the best of both worlds where it's current and it's past. So we have
Mhm.
2020 and we have current perspectives on this topic. And both of them I feel like are really, really valuable. Um, whether it's just support, whether you need to just be heard, you need to feel like you're not alone, and or in being able to look back on previous pivots that you've made and maybe feel comfort in them.
Mhm. Thank you. That's beautiful.
So,
So,
so do you want to talk about first what pivoting is and what that means,
yeah.
Stress?
Yeah. So what pivoting means to me is we are closing the door on one or part like a chapter of our life or part of a chapter of our life and walking through the doorway to another one. Pivoting can mean you are, starting to offer new services. Maybe you're not just being a lash extension artist anymore. Pivoting can mean you do all of these services and you're knocking them out so that you can focus on one thing. It can also mean maybe you want to um, maybe you're a business owner and you want to work for a business now instead. Maybe it's vice versa. I know that some people have quit doing lashes entirely and come back to doing lashes. I've done that four times in my career. who
Mm-hmm.
who knows if it's going to happen again? But I've literally quit doing lashes four times and come back to doing lashes, and each one of those times I could have felt like a failure, or I could have seen that this is moving my purpose forward. So it's basically like anytime we make a big career shift or change, to me, that would be a pivot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that pivot is kind of a synonym for transition in the context
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about for this episode. So, just to give context, because I think we're going to be using that term a lot during this episode. So, you guys can kind of, have that understanding of we're talking about transition when we use the word pivot. So I agree with you. I think that pivoting is sometimes very necessary in our career, like what we were talking about. And I really like what you were talking about with, it could look like, stopping lashing. It could be, wanting to now work for a company instead of working for yourself. There's a number of transitions and pivots that you can make in your career. And right now, I think this is a really important topic that we're talking about because I'm noticing and I'm just observing massive amounts of transition and pivoting happening within our industry. A lot of people are now wanting to work for other brands instead of working for themselves. A lot of new generation lash artists are coming into the lash industry and they're, wanting to grow their lash business. They're wanting to figure out how to do that in an economical crisis, for lack of a better term. A lot of lash artists are now trying to find ways to make money without just lashing and getting their hands on clients. That's maybe different than opening a product line. Maybe it's different than educating. It's different than opening a salon. That's probably the number one question that I get on social media is a lot of people want to ask or they want to know, how can I make money outside of doing these three core things that have been consistently repeated and patterned within our lash industry, where it's kind of like the expected next step, I think. And I'll be the first to say, and I think that maybe Tress would understand and maybe agree, I've done almost all of those except for opening a product line myself. And I've even dabbled in that with merch and creating certain products that were one of a kind. And I was launching SKUs. So I did do that in a different way of a product line. But I have opened a creative studio. I have been a full-time lash artist. I have been an in-person educator. I've been an online educator. I have been, I've had 1099 independent contractors. I have done the majority of the things that you're in quotes supposed to do when you graduate in the lash industry. And I can tell you that I have pivoted every single one of those things, even though originally getting into this industry, I thought that all of those were my goal and that I needed to continue advancing in all of those areas.
That is something I want to draw attention to. That's probably an even better definition is if you have a goal or you have a plan and you deviate from it and you go in a different direction or you change your mind, that is pivoting, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And, right now I'm in a transition period personally where a lot of people are aware that I open Undefined Studios. I've been on podcasts about it. I've been on stages speaking about Undefined Studios. I have an Instagram page for it. It's in my bio. I talk about it on my Instagram page a lot. I've answered a lot of questions. I've taught people how to open creative studios and walked them through that process and making sure that their business was set up correctly. And right now, I'm actually in the process of closing Undefined Studios, and I haven't publicly announced that yet. This is the first time that I'm announcing that, but I'm in the process of closing Undefined Studios. I also have taken a really massive step back with my in-person education. I stopped online retailing merch and product. There's a number of things that now I'm transitioning because originally that being my goal in this industry and getting into this industry, I knew that if I was going to be a lash artist, I was going to open a studio. My goal transitioned with that originally. Originally, I was like, I'm going to open a salon, right? Eventually that ended up changing. That vision ended up changing with Undefined Studios. It's called Undefined because I created a creative studio and I took a completely unique route that I have never seen done in the industry before. With creating Undefined Studios, I didn't have the goal anymore of having a salon culture. I didn't have the goal of having hair, skin, and nails of a traditional salon style space. I wanted to celebrate all art forms, and so I created Undefined Studios, and I called it a creative space rather than a salon. And so I've always kind of found those unique routes to take, and I originally, like I said, getting into this industry, knew that I was going to open a space and I wanted to eventually advance into that and expand into that. That was my biggest goal. And it was so interesting whenever I actually achieved that. I actually had some sort of identity crisis because I didn't know what was next. I was like, I've reached every goal within like 4 years of my career. By the time I was 24 years old, I reached every milestone that I had ever set up for myself. And I didn't know what was next. And it shattered me for a minute because I was like, I'm just now kind of, what is it called? Like flounder when you're like just trudging in the water, when you're just like keeping your head above water. What is that word called? I
Treading
forget.
water.
Treading. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, like now I feel like I'm just treading rather than actually taking steps forward. And that was a really interesting mindset that I wasn't expecting. Like you think when you reach your goals that you've always set out for yourself that you're like, I've got it all, and you're going to have this huge sense of like uh, I don't know, purposeful and like and fulfillment, and you're like, I'm now content and now it's just going to keep building momentum. And a lot of times it does. And I certainly felt the most fulfilled. The girls that I've had, the relationships that I've built, undefined means absolutely fucking everything to me. But it's also okay to feel other feelings that maybe don't feel as good when you do reach the goals that you originally think are going to be the end all be all for yourself.
I have something I'd like to add to this. You could see my face.
I know, I could see your face. I was like, yes.
I'm like over here taking notes because I'm like, I don't want to forget this. Um, so you brought up something really interesting, and I think a lot of people might have like the like, oh, boohoo, poor you. You achieved all of your goals in such a short period of time. So before
Mm.
you have that moment, I'd like to pull back and I'd like to talk about that for a second and give some perspective to that. I experienced something really similar when I really jumped into my lash career. I've been in the beauty industry since I was 16, but when I made the commitment to lashes, I achieved in 1 to 2 years what I expected to achieve in 10. And I was left reeling. I felt like I had no purpose left. I felt like I didn't know what to do now. I felt like if I achieved this, like my happiness meter was tied to it, my stress meter was tied to it. When I achieved this thing, it was going to be huge and it was going to change my life, and it did change my life, but it also left me floundering. It left me treading water, going, I don't know what to do next. I didn't have big goals for the next 3 years after that besides building my Instagram account because
Mhm.
I didn't know what to do. And again, you might be like, oh, sad day, I feel so bad for you. Like you achieved your goals really quickly. Um, and it leaves you reeling. So one of the things I love this example, and I'm trying to remember what book it's in. But it's an example of a coach, a basketball coach named Larry Bird, and he was an amazing basketball player, like amazing basketball player. And he was just like a savant, basically. And then he wanted to go into the next part of his career when he was done physically playing basketball, and he became a coach. And apparently he was a terrible coach. I've only read about it. I don't actually know this firsthand, but this is kind of how the story goes. And it's because he achieved what he wanted so quickly. It didn't his achievement didn't go slow. It wasn't hard won. Like he worked hard, but he achieved it so quickly he couldn't look at the players on the team he was coaching and have compassion for them and empathy and understanding to how they couldn't just get it like he got it. So the slow road ahead, the painful road, the one where you work and you fight and you put your blood, sweat and tears into it, and the road that takes time to get there is the road that's going to be the most rewarding because you're going to gain the most wisdom for it. You're going to gain the most joy out of it. You're going to gain the most growth out of it. You don't usually experience an extraordinary amount of growth by reaching success really fast. That's why it has a tendency to fall apart really fast. So if you feel like you are just trudging through the mud when Aaron and I were treading water, right? But you're barely picking up one foot and putting it in front of the other. I'm telling you that experience that you're going through is going to be much more rewarding in the end than finding success quickly.
100%. And one thing that I've learned the most throughout this entire thing is that I know that it's a little cliche, but a lot of people say the goal is not where the adventure is. Like the goal is not where the reward is. I found so much more purpose and so much more life within myself and my identity and my love for this career within the process of reaching that goal. It wasn't the goal when I originally was like this X amount of money, this goal, this owning a studio, owning a product line, being an educator, having an online, I mean, whatever you can name. I thought originally, once I reach that goal, that's when I'm going to get my fulfillment. That's when I'm going to feel all of these amazing euphoric feelings, right? Realistically, I felt so much more in my purpose and in my alignment during the process of reaching that goal than actually having that goal, which
Absolutely.
and I think that that's really important to fall in love with the process more than the end result. And I know that that's cliche, but I learned that in this process of opening a studio and, creating all of my online courses. Like I've talked to Tress about it a number of times behind closed doors. Like creating my online courses was the most like uh I don't want to say the word impulsive because I had thought about them for so effing long. But when I had the impulse to really sit down and just create them, I finished them so quickly because it just flowed out of me. And I just absolutely fell in love with the process of creating the online academy and creating online courses and the process of learning the tech and learning the sales and the marketing and all of the things that go into that. And I found so much passion in the process of it rather than the end result of having them. And not to, to be clear, I'm not saying that the end result of having any of these goals is bad or that I don't love them. Like,
Right.
please believe. That's not what I'm saying. But I remember sorry if you can hear my dogs in the background. There's a dog barking, so you
Hmm.
might hear them for a second.
I think we're good.
But I really found a love and like I said, the most passion in the process of leading up to the end goal than actually being at the end goal, because then you're like, okay, now what's next?
So
And
then you pivot.
and then you pivot and then you have to continue thinking of the next thing. So I remember being in the process, that's what I was going to say, of building all of these things, and I was going at 100 miles an hour. I was literally known by everybody that knows me, my friends, my clients, my family. Everybody knew that I never had time. I was booked 100% of the time. My brain never shut off for years and years and years. I was always moving at 100 miles an hour. I had no time. Like I honestly stopped getting invited to a lot of events because they just knew that my answer would be no because I was working. So,
Yeah, I understand that feeling.
yeah. So that sort of pace is also, I remember being in that mindset, in that pace, in that day to day, that schedule, those routines, the hard work that I was putting in to reach these goals. And I remember it feeling like I wasn't getting anywhere day to day. And I remember feeling like, what is this all for? Why am I doing all of this? Like, this sucks. I want to be going to this event. And as much as I love what I'm doing right now, I remember feeling like there wasn't enough payoff immediately happening. And I went through hard shit mentally, learning lessons and things that were just the amount of stress that, like you said, like you're just tied to your stress in those moments in your productivity. And that was like probably one of the hardest and shakiest mental status points of my life, was going at 100 miles an hour and really just trying to keep up. And I had assistants. I've had a number of assistants. I've had help. I've had a team behind me. But at the same time, so I want to give credit where it's due. I have an amazing support system. So I wasn't always doing it by myself, and I was onboarding and I was asking for help where I needed it. But it doesn't take away from the amount of stress that you, as the owner and the leader of your company and of your goals, you are the one pushing that forward and creating that momentum. So it does kind of fall on you. And those lessons in those moments, I remember feeling like this is never going to end. This is the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. Like, this is awful. And countless amounts of panic attacks. And now looking back on all of those moments and those lessons that I learned, those are the moments that I teach other people. Those are the moments that I can coach other artists through wanting to open a studio, wanting to become an educator, wanting to create online courses. And they hit the same roadblocks that I hit. And now I know exactly A, I can empathize with them. I know exactly where they're at and how they feel. And B, I can coach them through it from somebody who's been through it, just having to go through the thick of it and then getting to the other side of it. So I can coach them through and support them through with the experience of having gone through all of the hard things. And to me, that's the biggest thing that I'm thankful for, having taken all of these roads and really having true life experience of doing everything that I teach and going through those hard things for years, because now I know A, where my passion lies, where my truest heart's desire and where my purpose in this industry lies, where my my heart center is in this industry, where I want to focus on, and how to help people and how to coach people through all of the different avenues. So, skill building by having experiences like that, I would always encourage you to look at it as that. And I've always looked at it as that. Even in the hardest moments, I'm like, okay, this is skill building. Like, this is a hard shit that you have to go through in order to be experienced in this, in order to be able to look back and actually offer wisdom from a place of life experience rather than just like, no shade to anybody, but the coaches that are kind of coaching or teaching things that they've never experienced or done before. And so, sorry, I'm like kind of ranting a little bit, but
It's okay. I
regardless,
like it.
I think that it's just really important that if you're in that place right now, that you look at it and continue reminding yourself, this is skill building right now. This is the shit that I'm going to look back on, as hard as this is, through this panic attack. That's how I would talk myself down. Literally, in the midst of a panic attack, I would be like, I know that in the future, this hard thing that I'm going through, I'm going to look back on this and I'm going to be able to turn this into wisdom. I'm going to be able to help somebody through this in the future because I'm going through it so that somebody else doesn't have to, or I can help them through it when they do have to. And I remember literally in my head, that's what I would say to myself. This is skill building. This is skill building. This is the things that you have to go through in order to reach the level of whatever your highest form is that you want to reach in this industry or in life. These are the things that are going to end up concocting that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's
And
so
this
that
is
really,
usually what leads up to a pivot, right? So like,
yes,
so going through all of this, like the hardship is where the gold is at, because you're going to come out of it on the other side. And if you allow yourself to look at it and go, I'm thankful for this experience. I don't know why yet, but I'm thankful for it. You
absolutely.
will find that what you've learned through the hardship is what makes the future so beautiful. So like when I'm gonna back way up and tell a story from like a long time ago. But I was in competitive Latin and ballroom dance when I was a high schooler, and it was my passion in life. I thought that I was going to be in dance forever. I wanted to coach dance. I wanted to compete. It is actually why I went to aesthetic school, and it's why I became a makeup artist and a lash artist, is because I had the intention to do makeup at competitions across the US and around the world in order to fund me like competing in those competitions like every third competition or so. You guys, I had a life plan. Like I was going to teach at a studio, like I knew what I was going to do. And I got really, really sick. I had mono for like 8 to 9 months. I was like a very, very sick girl. And it destroyed my dance career. And so like I thought that that was going to be my life. And then by the time I recovered from this illness, my body was trashed. My muscle memory was gone. I was basically starting from square one because my body had been so sick and it was so weak. And I needed to pivot. I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And it was devastating. Was I 18 years old? Yes. But at that point in my life, I didn't know any different. I just knew that I had a plan for my life and it derailed hard. And so I became a makeup artist, and I went to esthetician school and I became an esthetician, and that's how I got into lashes. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful story for me to look back on now and go, I thought I knew where I was going, but if I hadn't pivoted, I wouldn't be where I am today. And there were times that I quit doing lashes and pivoted and went in a different direction. I worked at a coffee shop for 4 years, and I did, I took coffee orders, and I did customer service, and I took care of people at 4 in the morning for years on end. And it taught me so much, even though I looked at it as I quit doing lashes because I failed, because I wasn't confident enough in them. That pivot taught me so much, right? And then I started doing lashes again, and I could have been ashamed of it. I could have been like, oh, well, here I go again. Like, I'm going to hang my head and walk back in the door and be like, all right, well, I'm here again. And instead, I was able to change direction and keep on going, right? Um, but the dance thing for me, I had a plan for my life. And then later on, I had another plan for my life. And most recently, I had a plan to do coaching full time. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is my calling. This is my career. I have lived my entire life gathering knowledge and going through hardship and learning from the things. And now I'm going to help other people. And while I still do that on a very part time level, I pivoted again recently with a new role in a different in a completely different direction than I thought I was going to go, and I'm in marketing when I thought that I was going to be coaching people. And that was a huge pivot for my career, and that's okay too. I want to encourage you that if you've had to go backwards or you feel like you've gone backwards, you haven't gone backwards. You're starting again from an advantage because you
Mm.
have the knowledge and the wisdom of what you've gained since then, right?
Yeah, I
It,
really love that you just said that. Like, I really want to emphasize and just like asterisk that. Like, I want that to be like in stars. It's not going backwards. Like, you're and that's something that I've really struggled with every pivot. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I failed at this or whatever. Like, I love that you just said that because it's not failing. It's absolutely starting from a different advantage.
it's funny because I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was like, have you ever prayed for wisdom? And she was like, uh-huh. And I was like, yeah. Because wisdom comes through the hard stuff, guys.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wisdom doesn't
absolutely.
come from everything going well.
No,
And I
no, yeah.
prayed for wisdom for years, and now I can look back on it and I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I pray for wisdom every day. That's what I want
Yeah.
in this life, you know? So I think that this really brings an interesting topic listening to you explain that. I think that in a lot of people's mind, they think of pivoting in the sense of monetary gain. So they'll make a pivot if something will make them more money. And it makes, in quotes, logical sense to take X route because you're going to make more money doing that and kind of, you know, scratching off the things and removing the things that are either taking your time freedom away or you're not making as much money doing these routes or these paths. If you have your hands in multiple buckets, then other things that could be making you more money versus I think some of the most impactful pivots that I've ever made were heart forward pivots,
Bingo.
even if they didn't make logical sense or I made less money by taking that pivot. I think that those have been the most impactful and the most momentum building pivots that I've done ever in my life.
Let's focus on that for a minute. Every time I have pivoted for money, there's something inside of like my heart or my soul that rejects it.
Mhm.
Like, yes, I have been able to build my career and earn more money as my career has continued to go. I've also gone backwards and
Mhm.
I've earned less money, like significantly less money off and on throughout my career, um over the last like 20 years. But every time I've pivoted strictly for finances because I thought that it would make me more money, I have struggled immensely. And every time I've pivoted from a heart position, I don't know how you said that, but every time I've done that with a heart forward perspective of like, this is how I can serve, or this is what's going to, like, this is what fuels my heart and my passion and my soul. That's when I thrive.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that, and I think that it's really interesting, looking at this industry from an outsider's perspective. I think that that's why a lot of people have been pivoting recently. I think
Mhm.
that a lot of decisions and a lot of pivots have been made with an expectation that you're going to end up making more money, making a better or more hourly rate, or spending less time and making more money. You know, whatever the Instagram is starting to teach you, less
Oh
work
my
for more
gosh.
money.
I can't open Instagram without people telling me that I have to be making 7 income streams and that I can be doing X, Y, and Z in order to make more money and get more money and get more money. And like when I sit down and go, okay, I'm going to choose the thing that's right for me, even though it doesn't get me more money, then I can earn more. Then
Mhm.
I naturally earn more money.
Yeah, the work less and make more catchphrase that's been happening recently, I think it's actually really, really hurting our industry in general. And I think it's hurting mindset as well. I think that a lot of people also are calling it grind culture. And in my opinion, I think
Mm,
that grind culture is just working hard. And I value hard work. I think
I
that
value hard
hard
work as well.
I value hard work. I think that grind culture and, working yourself into the ground with your hard work and never taking rest days, not taking care of your body physically and mentally, I think that is where it crosses the line. But I absolutely value hard work. And I think that that should never be demonized, because I think that the most successful people are the hardest workers, and they put
Mhm.
in the time, they put in the work, and they have built the skills to get to where they are. And nowadays, Instagram's very much shoving down our throats work less, make more mentality, when you haven't originally put in the work up front to build the skills, to build the wisdom, to go through the hard things, to have those experiences, to pivot multiple times, to be able to actually take that step back and still make money with the skills that you've built. And
Mhm.
that's an entire rabbit hole that we can go down maybe on another episode, but with when it comes to pivoting and relating that back to pivoting, there is hard work involved. There is uncomfortable times
Always.
involved. There is uncomfortable experiences, uncomfortable emotions. The amount of days that I've cried going through, like trying to reach these goals and getting to where I want to be, or where I think a lot of people have the goals to be, whether it's a certain Instagram follower amount, a certain monetary amount. Like I said, having these goals at the end of that tunnel, it's a beautiful thing to have goals. I think you should always have goals. And
Same.
if those goals are one of the things that I've mentioned, I think that's gorgeous.
Mhm.
Strive for them, like go for them. It's not what aligned with me. And I learned after doing them that I wanted to pivot, because once I reached them, I realized that wasn't my heart's calling. That wasn't my soul's
Mhm.
calling.
That's
And
a great point. Sorry,
that's
I got
okay.
excited about that. I've
What?
done that too. Like, you might hit a goal and go, "Why doesn't this feel good? Why doesn't this feel right?" And it might be like, "Good job, take a moment to celebrate yourself, or several moments to celebrate yourself and, like, enjoy the fact that you hit that goal." But if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't mean that you have to keep going after the other goals that you had planned after that. You can change what you have coming next based on whether or not that most recent one aligned with you.
Mhm. So with that being said, I wanna ask you a question, and
Oh,
I'm
fun.
kinda putting you on the spot here,
Yay.
there's not really a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious what your opinion is about it. When you reach that point where you reach the goal and then you realize, this isn't doing it for me in one way or another, maybe it's not everything that I'm thriving in, it's not everything that I'm wanting, it's not filling my cup, it's causing more heartache for me, whatever it may be. When you reach that goal, how soon do you think you should pivot once you feel that feeling? Do you think that you should, wait it out a while, and you should, try to let it unfold a little bit, see where it might go, see if you get, maybe a creative urge, or like you're like, oh, I understand now why I'm here, and like you can take it from there? Or do you think that as soon as you get that feeling that you should pivot out of it? And
That is such a good question.
Mhm.
Okay. So there is something to be said for waiting. Like, I think waiting can be really valuable. I think it can be really important. I have had many conversations with friends where they're like, I hit this goal. I don't know what's next now. I have to keep going. And I go, now is when you get to wait. And now is when you get to rest, because you did the thing, right? You don't always have to be striving for the next thing. That's where burnout comes. I don't think burnout comes from just working hard. and having priorities. Like, I think burnout comes from never resting and never celebrating your accomplishments. And so what we have a tendency to do, and I've been told that this is an ADHD thing, but I think most people in this industry can identify with it anyway, um, is that when somebody has ADHD, or when somebody was like a child and they weren't acknowledged for the things that they accomplished, they don't give themselves any acknowledgement for accomplishment. So if you hit a goal and you're like, well, that's great, that didn't feel good, on to the next thing, you're not sitting with that. You're not allowing yourself to celebrate that, and you're not internalizing it. And so I think that if you hit a goal and you're like, wow, this doesn't, like, whatever, okay, I think that that means you need to sit and you need to wait, and you need to allow yourself to celebrate it and congratulate yourself. Um, and I think that if you don't feel like you are aligned with a goal that you just hit, it doesn't mean pivot right away. It means slow down. It means reanalyze. If you pivot immediately, you will constantly find yourself on the edge of burnout. But if you
Mm,
allow yourself to sit with it and internalize it and see what wisdom you've gained from it, and what life experience and knowledge you've gained from it, then you can go, okay, after a little while here, I don't think that this direction is still right for me. Now maybe I'll pivot. Now maybe I need to look at my goals and maybe change their direction.
yeah. So at what point, or if, do you think you've waited too long? Or do you believe that there is such thing as waiting too long?
I think the only time I waited too long was when I was in a period of my life years ago that I was extremely anxious and extremely depressed, and I didn't believe in myself for anything. I didn't believe there was anything that made me special. I didn't believe that there was anything that made me stand out from anybody else in the whole wide world. And so I just waited inside in a shell,
Mm.
like trying to protect myself. Otherwise, when I've had to wait, I always look back and I see that it's intentional. Like, I see that it can be used for purpose. Like, sometimes I will have hit a goal, an accomplishment, and now I have like a year or a year and a half, maybe two, go by where I don't know what my next goal is.
Mm.
I don't know what my next step is. But it doesn't mean that I have to, like, it doesn't mean I have to find it. I've searched so hard for goals in the past. And when I finally allow myself to rest and I finally allow myself to wait, that's when my next one will come to me, but not when I'm pushing for it. That's a personal experience.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Every time that I'm like, where's my next direction? Where's my next pivot going to go? I really lean into the present and the routine that I have right now, the things that I'm doing right now. And I really lean into doing them better and finding ways to
Yes.
improve what I'm doing right now. So when I transitioned, when I was lashing full time, I was seeing, 5, 6 clients a day for 7 days a week. And I was burning myself out like no other, working 12-hour days and seeing as many clients as I could. And I originally transitioned into wanting to educate. Okay. So at that point, I was like, I don't know what's next. After I'm doing these courses and I'm teaching students every week, now what do I do? What comes after that? I remember I really sat with, how can I make this education better? And how can I focus on improving what I'm doing right now? Because trying to always forward think, you're almost skipping steps, and
Mhm.
you're almost keeping holes in your current position, when that's where, again, a lot of that skill building happens, and you have the most experience when you lean into what you're doing right now and doing it even better and becoming an expert in everything that you're doing before you try reaching the next step and going to the next thing.
So that articulates perfectly what I mean when I say rest and wait. I don't
Mm,
mean sit around and do nothing. I mean, like, lean into what you're doing now and do it to the best of your ability, but you don't have to know what's next all the time. So you
yeah.
can wait for what's coming next by just doing what you're doing really well now.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So let's talk about what a pivot can look like and like what the actual, action of a pivoting looks like and some of the emotional things that you can either expect or experience going through potentially. I think that pivoting by itself is can and it can be very challenging to go through.
Mhm.
And I think that pivoting for a lot of people, um, at least for me, I suppose I shouldn't say for a lot of people, I can only speak for myself. It feels like a lot of grief. And I literally
Mhm.
feel like I'm grieving and like I'm mourning something that was or a goal of mine that I'm now having to let go. And I think that for me, in the past, when I've gone through pivots, and currently going through a multiple pivots, I feel like a lot of my struggle with it and why I wait as long as I do is because it feels like I'm losing a part of myself. And the way that I explain this is for me, the amount of intention, the amount of preparation, the amount of planning, the amount of purpose and just truly intention that I put behind every single thing that I do and every direction that I take in my life and in this industry. I put so much behind it that it's literally a piece of my soul that I'm birthing into this world. Undefined Studios, my education, any of my online courses, any coaching that I do, if you've ever worked with me, you know, like the intention that I'm putting behind everything, hopefully. And so when you have that amount of investment from a soul's perspective, and then you pivot away from it, or it feels like you're losing it, or you're choosing to lay it to rest, it literally can feel like a loss. To me, it feels like a death, and you have to go through that grieving process sometimes. And I think that's kind of the messy look that a lot of people don't talk about. They don't talk about the hardship of what a pivot can feel like or look like, and some of the emotional turmoil that you can go through going through a pivot. And I wait.
Mhm.
I every time that I've pivoted in a sense of removing something from my life rather than continuing to add and add and add and add and add, I feel that sense of loss. And then I wait way too long to where it's taking away from me too much for too long to where I do reach that point of depression or I do reach that point
Mhm.
of, mental and emotional um turmoil. And then I'm like, oh, now I realize that I need to let this go. So for you going through pivots, have you ever experienced that sort of emotional loss or moving through that grief process?
Absolutely. I think there's a few different kinds of pivots. I think that there are pivots that are forced upon us and they come from outside circumstances. I think sometimes those can be the most painful. There are pivots where we are pivoting up or we're like, it's a positive pivot. And then there's pivots where we feel like they are negative and like we have to do them because something that we've done isn't right. So I'm going to give very small examples of each one of these really quick just so that you can know where I'm at speaking about it. An example of a positive intentional pivot for me was when I quit doing all other services besides lashes so that I could focus intently on one area of my career to get really, really good at it. I knew that if I continued to do makeup and hair and I continued to do weddings and photo shoots and that kind of thing, I wasn't ever going to give any of what I was doing enough like laser focus to get where I wanted to in my career with it. So that was hard to let go of because I loved it, but it was like a a positive pivot in my experience. Um there are there are pivots that are forced upon us because of outside circumstances. So that could be, for example, you lost a job. I've lost a job before, right? And you have absolutely no choice but to pivot. And like once when I was let go from a job, I was like, I have no backup plan. I have I don't know what I literally I just like went and cut my hair off and got a tattoo because I just felt like so lost. I needed to do something to like feel right, like something to feel positive, to feel like I was in control of something because I felt like it was so out of my control. That was a pivot that I needed, and it was super necessary for like looking back. Like I needed to be let go from that job. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere in it. Um, but that was forced upon me. And then there's pivots like either leaving a job or choosing to work in a different direction where you really, really loved what you were doing or you loved who you were doing it with. And you know that it's just not time. It's just not like it's time for you to move on to do something different in your life for where you're being called. The second two that I just explained, I would say I went through full grieving processes for. Losing my job, it was faster because it was outside of my control. When I have walked away from jobs before, which have been many because I've grown in my career multiple times, um, that has been some of the hardest experiences of my life because I'm making the choice to do it, and so I'm grieving this loss that I like.
Have to
This
take
is the wrong way to
accountability
put it,
for.
but that I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
I'm grieving
Yeah.
a loss that I made a decision to lose, and that was on average, those have been like the hardest for me to go through.
Yeah. That's interesting. I really like that you made the differentiation between the different types of pivots because I think that's really important to identify. Um, for me, I think that I can see your perspective on that and where the grief of how they would be different. I feel like outside circumstances, removing a goal of yours or forcing a pivot on you, for me, that almost forces more grief because it feels like something's being ripped away from me without my choice to
Yeah.
change that. Like I don't have autonomy over my decision. So for me, it feels like the opposite, where if I am making that decision, I feel less grief over that because I know why I'm making that decision and I've spent time planning for it and thinking about it. And I know that it's best for me. So I can almost forward focus rather than backwards focus. So my grief is almost opposite of yours, where if I'm making that decision, I know it's because it's better for me and I can focus there versus, like I said, if it's being taken away from me, I feel more grief there because it wasn't my decision to make that change.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I can see
I
both perspectives for
I
sure.
think there's one more pivot, and that's when you feel like you're forced to do something that is in your control. So, like, for example, if your business is not thriving in the way that you thought it would, which I've been there too, if it's not thriving in the way that you thought it would, and you need to either close up shop or walk away from it or change your business model in order to move on to the next part of your life,
Mm,
that's another kind of pivot. And the one that I would be the I would caution um I would caution how you treat yourself through
yeah,
that the most because it can feel like failure and it doesn't necessarily mean it is. I've
yes,
been in this career long enough to know that when I have thought I have failed, and so I've had to pivot because of it, the greatest things came out of it in the future. And if I had stayed where I was, I wouldn't have gone in the direction that I went to get where I am today.
yeah,
Um, and I think being able to look at it from that perspective and be kind to yourself through it and focus on how much you've learned and how maybe it's what you've learned what not to do. I've learned a lot of what not to do. I've learned a lot of how I don't want to act. I've learned a lot of how I don't want to be, from experience, and that's just as valuable
yes,
as everything else.
yep. I 100% agree. And if you take away anything from this episode, sometimes pivoting is necessary
Hmm.
in life. And I would even go as far to say that pivoting is inevitable being a human.
Yeah.
So getting familiar with it, and I don't want to say getting comfortable with it because it's not comfortable. And I'm not
Mm.
even going to sit here and tell you that pivoting or transition is in any way tr- always fun or always
No,
happy.
it's usually not. It's usually
It's
hard.
usually not. There's much less times that I've had to for something happy than being forced to pivot because of something else.
Hmm.
So, I think that it's important that you're aware that it's inevitable being human, whether it's in a personal, interpersonal relationships or career wise. Um, there's always going to be transition that we have to be making in order to evolve and in order to grow. This was a
And
really
it's good for you.
Unfortunately,
it's
good for
hard,
you.
but it's so good. You know, like I can look back now and know that the hardest things I ever went through helped me the most.
Yeah. This
It's
was a
just
really
in
good
that
episode.
time it doesn't feel like it, and that's okay. It doesn't have to.
I love this. I love this topic. I
Mhm.
love this episode. I feel like this is really important for everyone to be aware of and to hear and to right now it feels relevant in our industry.
It does. A lot of people are pivoting, and if you
Yeah.
are, it's okay. You'll
I'm
get through it.
excited for you if you are.
Mhm.
I'm excited for the future for all of us, myself included, and you, Tress, like all of the pivots that are happening. It feels like everyone's sort of in transition right now, and I'm excited. I think that the other end of that is something to celebrate. I think that pivots are worth celebrating
Mhm.
because there's
Yeah.
something that's gonna come out of it that's gonna be good.
Yeah. So celebrate, guys.
Yay!
Whatever transition you're in right now, you've got this.
And congratulations, even if it's hard.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else that you want to add?
I love you.
I love you.
I love you. Bye-bye. See you guys next time.
See you on the next episode, guys.